Today I'd like to talk to you about a facet of Chinese thought that most everyone has seen, but very few understand. It's the symbol known as Taijitu in Chinese, and simply called Yinyang in English. It's seen here in the background of this painting of Lao Tzu, the Taoist sage. Most folks know this image vaguely has something to do with a general Chinese conception of balance, but few recognize the movement that's implicit in the image, signifying the harmonious waxing and waning of cosmic relationships. But with modern technology, we can add movement and see the kind of ebb and flow intended in the original. Most people mistakenly associate this very modern yin yang with an ancient school of philosophy known as Taoism, especially with a text known as the Tao Te Ching. But the version you see here actually evolved over many centuries. In fact, it took more than 1600 years after the Tao Te Ching for something like the modern yin yang to appear. As a graduate student, I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Robin Wong of LMU Los Angeles on her research about the history of Yinyang. I learned a lot went into the evolution of this symbol, as it drew from ancient and medieval astronomy, numerology, and divination practices. And as I hope to show, it's still evolving now in our own culture. Two important things happened during the 1600 plus years between the ancient Tao Te Ching and the modern Yinyang. First, a philosopher of the Three Kingdoms period, named Wang Bi, produced what became the definitive commentaries on the Tao Te Ching and the ancient text of divination known as the I Ching, or Classic of Changes. Commentaries like his often were more important than the original documents in early China. As Ronnie Littlejohn has put it, nearly all pre-imperial Chinese texts are composite in nature. The masterful compiler, not a bamboo bundle or silk scroll, was the unit of knowledge at the time. Wang Bi was an early Xuan Shui philosopher. Two main contributions of this philosophy were the way it synthesized Taoist meditation practices with Confucian ethics and the cosmology of the I Ching, as well as the view that nothingness was the root of all beings and the completion of all affairs. The second important thing to happen in that 1600-year period I mentioned was the arrival of Buddhism from India via the Silk Road, sometime during the Han Dynasty. Even though it was a foreign system of belief, Buddhism fit nicely with the native Chinese philosophies and folk religions of the time. The Chinese gradually embraced the Indian export, especially since its ideas about emptiness and impermanence looked a lot like Taoist thoughts about nothingness and the local folk religions that had been built around the changes of the yin and yang found in the I Ching. By the Sung dynasty, several philosophers were working on a grand synthesis of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. Among them was this man, Zhou Dunyi. Zhou Dunyi is credited with the first diagram of the Taijitu, which combined notions of nothingness and impermanence. As you could see, nothingness is depicted as the root of all things and the completion of all affairs, with the movement of yin and yang and the five phases situated in the middle. What is most often overlooked, however, is the tragic meaning of the Taijitu. As Edward Slingerland has put it, this yin-yang circle is mistakenly looked upon nowadays as a positive image of mystical wisdom. He continues, "It's happily slapped on surfboards and tattooed onto 20-year-old butts. In fact, it actually symbolizes a dark and pessimistic vision, akin to the Buddhist teaching of dukkha, or suffering. All striving leads to disappointment in the end because there is no permanence in the world." Slingerland concludes that the cycle of yin-yang is not to be celebrated, but escaped. This is the advice of nearly every Chinese philosophy, not just Taoism, namely that we should seek spontaneity by attuning ourselves to the cosmic dance. There's an old Chinese saying, 在文是马, about a farmer who lost his horse, yet found disaster turned into blessing and then back again. Ultimately, the farmer declares, truly, blessing turns to disaster, and disaster to blessing. The changes have no end, nor can the mystery be fathomed. This should underscore the influence of the I Ching on the evolution of the yin-yang symbol. In its earliest forms, that text was used as a guidebook for predicting how the movements of yin and yang might affect someone in their day-to-day life. Since the word yin just means the shady side and yang the sunny side of a hill, the ancient Chinese already understood that as time passes, one turns into the other. The way the ancients diagrammed yin and yang was by using broken and solid lines. But capturing the movement from solid yang to broken yin and back again proved very difficult, so the lines were put into 4 pairs, seen here on the right, and then 8 trigrams, seen on the left. Those trigrams were doubled again to produce a richer depiction of the various movements in the cosmic dance. The result was the 64 hexagrams of the received version of the I Ching. Finally, in the 16th century, at the end of the Ming Dynasty, Jiao Huiqian simplified the Taijitu and gave us a precursor to the modern version that we can all recognize.